Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Trouble to Transformation. Today's guest, I have Lynnette Fritshaw, a trauma coach, speaker, and soon to be author. Lynnette has dedicated 18 years of her life to the fire service, in which the last 14 years, Lynnette was the first and only female firefighter in her department. Lynnette took an early retirement in 2023 and founded Fire Within Crisis Services Incorporated. Along the way, Lynnette overcame some psychological injuries that were not things that she experienced on the job, but rather from men in positions of authority, where she endured bullying, harassment, discrimination, and misogyny. Lynnette's focus now is to speak her truth, to empower others to have the courage to do the same. She is now a certified trauma responder who does crisis intervention. She is a community and workplace traumatologist and trauma coach. Welcome, Lynnette. Thank you so much for coming on today. It is a real pleasure to have you here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so glad we finally were able to connect and do this.
Yes. Just so our viewers know, we had some real gremlins in the technology with multiple attempts to get this on the road. So Lynnette, just for our viewers, let them know some of your services and a little bit more of a detailed description of what you offer.
I have a multitude of services that I do. I am a certified trauma responder, so I can respond for crisis intervention immediately following any type of traumatic event, high stress situation, crisis, and I can intervene and offer support and resources to help guide people when they most need it. I'm a community and workplace traumatologist. So I can respond and assist and guide in workplace trauma crisis. I mean, high stress is in every workplace, it seems like. So being able to come in, and I offer custom workshops to give agencies, companies, the opportunity to learn healthy coping mechanisms, what to do in high stress situations, how trauma is impacting their employees in their current lives and on a daily basis, and what they can do about it. So I custom create workshops to suit every agency's needs. Sorry, it originally started with just first responders was my focus, and then I seen a massive need everywhere, anywhere and everywhere. So I broadened. I am also an ICISF approved instructor. So I teach assisting individuals in crisis and group crisis intervention for peer support. Again, that started out solely being available for first responders only. And then the ICISF themselves actually broadened it it was during the pandemic when they realized that people were really, really struggling. And so they broadened it to the public. So I teach those courses. They are an actual certification course to anyone that wants them, basically.
Yeah, that's excellent, Lynnette, because that was actually my question that I was going to jump in there and ask if that was just for first responders, because, you know, as we know, like even in BC alone, with all the fires and the floods and evacuations and stuff, there's been an incredible amount of stress amongst community. So that is excellent. Wow, that's incredible services. So in order to get to that position of leadership, that doesn't come without a backstory. Yeah.
There's always a story.
And that's one thing that I see regularly on your posts is that I don't have a secret. I have a story. And I am so excited for you to be here today to share that story. So let's do a deep dive.
I'll just say that quote is what changed my life and actually brought me forth in being able to start telling my story.
Yeah, excellent. You know, one thing too that I wanted to mention is that after 18 years of service, it must have been incredibly hard to walk away from a career, a very exciting career.
It was a career that I absolutely loved.
Yeah.
I was insanely passionate about. It wasn't easy to walk away, but I knew that I had to.
Mm, yeah.
So that kind of made it easier. I had to just take the step and make it happen. It was just time. It was time.
Yeah. And with our conversation that we had previously before the recording, you actually didn't start out with a desire to be a firefighter. So where did it all start?
It was so random. It was not anything to do with wanting the dream, or it was in the bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't watch it on TV and want to be one. It was none of the things that you always hear most of the people say.
Mm-hmm.
For me, it was really random. I was a hairdresser and salon owner for 15 years, and my job was killing me. It was physically killing me, standing with my arms up all day, bent over a sink. I was very physically fit, and I wanted to do something. I thrived when I was being like physically challenged, and standing in that position all day was not. So I started actually looking into fire investigation because I love investigative work. I feel like I'm a little bit of a private investigator at times. And so I thought, this is intriguing. So I started looking at that side of things and realized that you didn't have to be a firefighter in order to do that. You could just come in and do the investigation. But the way that my brain works is I thought, well, what if I could make myself a little bit more valuable by knowing what the firefighters do on the inside first when they're putting out the fires before I come in and do the investigation? Maybe if I have a little bit of an insider's view, it would make my investigations easier. So I started kind of looking at that direction, and I thought, well, I might as well go to fire school to get certified for that and then just pad my resume. That was the whole intention behind it.
Wow. Yeah.
And then I completed the bookwork at home, and I went to Texas for my practical portion.
Texas.
And I absolutely,
wow.
I absolutely fell in love with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was good at it.
What part did you fall in love with?
All of it. The teamwork, the high impact, the thinking on the fly, like problem solving, and all of it, literally all of it. And I was the only girl with 24 guys in my class.
Wow.
So that was a little bit intimidating at first, but I mean, they immediately welcomed me with open arms, and we were part of a team, which I had never been on something like that. Working together. It's a life and death situations where you're counting on each other. And I left fire school with a whole different idea of what I wanted to do.
Wow. It sounds really exciting, and the physical training, like let's look at the physical, mental, emotional, even spiritual, like all of those mountains that you had to climb in order to pass. I don't imagine it's a very easy task to pass as far as the physical training. And you did mention that you were in really good physical shape, but I would assume that this type of training would push you right to the limits.
Yeah, it's very, very strenuous. And it took me a few tries to be able to get to the point where I passed a physical exam, because it's unlike anything I had ever done before. And I had been put in a position at the fire department to run through a homemade physical test that they did.
Okay.
With very judgy, watchy eyes on me the whole time, which made it really, really difficult. And so I didn't pass. I actually had fallen during the exam, and one of the guys started to laugh. And that was the end of it for me. I couldn't make myself continue. I was humiliated, and I just wanted to get the fuck out of there. At a different location. And I passed on my first try.
Oh, at a different location.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
It was the one that they decided. It's called the CPAT, which is the physical test for firefighters. That's kind of across the board. And it had never been implemented before. And so I went and tried it. And from what I had read online, I don't know if it's completely accurate, but they had stated that 97% of females can't pass it on their first two tries.
Wow. Wow.
So it's a timed event and you have to complete all of these obstacles and
Mhm,
tasks in this time frame.
mhm.
And I did. I passed on my first try.
On your first try.
Yeah.
Wow, excellent. Congratulations though. That's a
Thank you.
yeah, that's a pretty big mountain to climb. Because if you look at any type of first responder and the military, Navy SEALs and stuff, like some of the training, they will all say that it is one of the hardest things that they've ever accomplished. And just like you said, lots of people don't make it. Was there ever
Mhm.
a time in your mind where you're like, you know what, this isn't for me, I quit?
Oh, so many times.
So many times.
So
Yeah.
many times.
Mhm.
Yeah, I was like, fuck it. What am I doing this for? Like,
Mm.
why am I putting myself through this? I have an insanely successful career happening right now. Like, I was a very successful entrepreneur, and
Mhm.
it's like, I don't need to put myself through this. But the driving force was they told me I couldn't do it.
Mm.
So
Interesting.
I was like, I will prove you wrong. And that was the why. That was what kept me going.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't stop until I was done.
Oh, wow. Excellent. Just not designed to quit.
No.
No, not in the vocabulary. Yeah, excellent. Was there any part of the training that was really fearful? Like just for instance, confined space, heights, low visibility. Was there anything that really kind of you really had to lean into the fear?
Honestly, no.
No.
No, none of those
Mhm,
pieces ever scared me.
mhm.
Like I wasn't afraid of heights. I was one of the only ones at fire school that climbed the 100-foot aerial to get a view from the top. Like I was like, let me up there. I want to take pictures and see it from the top. So heights
Mhm,
wasn't anything. Confined space. I was
mhm.
a lot smaller. Like I then a lot of the guys are very broad across the chest, and so I could like literally fit through spots that they couldn't. Um,
Ah, interesting.
so I kind of found that a good thing.
Yeah.
I enjoyed that.
Mhm.
Going into fires and things, we're never alone. You're
Mhm.
always in pairs,
Right.
so I never was afraid that
Mhm.
way. More so, I think the fact of I have the skills and the training, and I know what I need to do, and I'm going to get in there and do it. And then afterwards, it's kind of like, fuck, what did I just do?
Mm. Yeah, like that extreme focus into the now. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
it. Yeah,
just
that's
get in
interesting.
and get it done, and then afterwards, it's like, whew, okay, that was
Uh,
something.
was there any close calls where you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I just made it through there?
Mm, I mean, I had ceilings collapse on me and knock me to the floor, tight spaces,
Hmm.
but nothing where I was ever fearful or afraid that I was going to be in trouble or trapped.
Yes. And that was during the training
Training and the job.
and the job. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And, in our last conversation too, you did mention that one of your favorites was the vehicle extraction.
Yeah. Extrication. If I could have picked, we're a very small department. And so we
Yep.
did everything from driving the apparatus to running the pumps to being the
Hmm.
first ones in to doing alarms, motor vehicle extrication. Like we did everything.
Yeah.
You had to literally be a jack of all trades.
Yeah.
And
Interesting.
if I could have picked one piece to do, I would have never went into a stinky, gross, dirty fire again. I would have cut people out of cars all day long.
All day long.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was fun. Yeah, that would be interesting. I can only imagine the people's gratitude when they saw you coming, to get them out of there. Cause I can't even imagine what that would feel like being trapped in a vehicle or upside down and
Mm-hmm.
it'd be terrifying. So you must have been the hero in a lot of people's lives.
Mm-hmm. Hero is it's a hard word.
Yeah, well, but
Yeah.
it's like the archetype, right? The
Yeah.
protector.
Yeah. It was an amazing feeling, very rewarding to be able to, rescue someone or cut them out of a position where they were trapped or stuck, and being able to talk them through things too. As the only female, I had a different way of speaking with patients.
Yeah.
I could get their attention. The guys would always make fun of me because when people are in very high stress situations, they can be freaking out and losing their minds or not paying attention. They're not doing what you're asking them to do. You need them to remain still, or you need them to move your foot over in a certain way so we can cut the gas pedal off or something, and they're not listening. And I would always be like, look at me, look at me.
Yeah.
And it's like a wife speaking to right. A mom. I get that mom energy, and I could get their attention, and I'm like, this is what I need you to do. And they're like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do remember on Larry's podcast, you shared a really heartfelt story where you were actually not even on duty at the time, but you noticed, do you call it like a stage 3 fire? Was it
structure fire?
Yeah, structure fire, where you actually kicked the door in on a residential, like a home, and saved the occupants inside.
Yeah, we didn't kick the door in. The occupant actually came down and opened the door.
Oh,
but
dang, I was hoping you went in there with doors blazing.
No, just about. We were just about to actually kick the door in. It was very early in the morning. My family and I were getting ready to leave to go skiing in the mountains for the day. And we were running late because of me, which my husband now doesn't get to blame me for being late anymore. So we pulled out of the garage and into the driveway, and right away I was like, something's weird. And we pulled the truck out onto the street, and I was like, that is smoke. There's heavy smoke coming from somewhere. And I literally took my seatbelt off and was sitting like right up by the dash. And I was like, my eyes were darting everywhere. And I looked right at my husband and I said, there's a structure fire somewhere. I don't know where, but there's somewhere, and it's close. So we turned the corner and the smoke got thicker, and we turned the next corner around onto the next street, and we couldn't even see the street. The smoke was so thick. And slowly inched our way up the street and kind of determined that it was between two houses. We weren't sure which one. I didn't know if it was a shed. I didn't know if it was the house. I didn't know, but it was definitely a structure of some sort. It was pitch black outside. So we were trying to look and see, and my husband just pulled into one of the driveways and started honking the horn because it's that we are hours of the morning and everybody's still sleeping. The street was dead. And we both jumped out of the truck. He went running around behind the house. I went running around to the front, and I immediately called down to the fire hall and I said, we have a structure fire. There's no numbers on the house. So I was running around trying to figure out like where we were. And my husband hollered from the back, it's this one. And so I was giving them landmarks and trying to explain like where we were, and got off the phone. He come running around and he said, the whole back of the house is on fire.
Oh my God.
So we went running up to the front door, and I was hammering on the door and looking through the window. Not a stitch of smoke inside. House is dark. People are sleeping, I'm assuming. Hammering on the door. And I said to him, we need to kick the door in. So I turned just to get ready for him to kick the door in, and the light flicked on. And standing at the top of the stairs was a very pregnant woman and two little girls. And their eyes were just huge.
Oh my God.
And so I was banging on the door, and I'm like, your house is on fire. Your house is on fire. You have to open the door. So she made her way down the stairs and opened up the door. And we got inside, and we said, your house is on fire. We have to get out like now. And I said, is there anyone else in the house? And I thought I heard her say, there's one more. So I went running up the stairs, did a search, went running up to the bedrooms, did a search, ran down the hallway, did a search, nothing, came back down. And I said, is this everyone or is there one more? And she said, no, this is everyone. I said, okay. Whew. So we started getting the little girls dressed in coats and boots. And then another neighbor had actually pulled up, and he was standing at the door. So we handed the little girls to him and said, put them in your truck because it's winter. It was the end of January. So he took them out the door, and then I went to grab her coat, and I turned, and she took off up the stairs on me.
Oh my God.
So I went running after her, and I said, what are you doing? We have to go. And she was on the phone with her husband. And she was at the pantry and she looked at me and she said, "I'm grabbing a fire extinguisher." And I grabbed her by both her hands and I looked her straight in the face and I said, "That's not going to do anything. We have to go." And right past her, I could see the seam in the wall and it was glowing orange. And then I looked up and all the pot lights were right full of flames. The
Oh my
entire
God.
ceiling was fully involved.
Wow.
So I said to her, "We have to go and we have to go now." So I got her back down to the landing, got her boots and her coat on, opened up the door for her to get her car. It was in the garage. Opened up the garage door. My husband, our eyes met as the garage door opened because he was back sitting in the truck. So he backed his truck down the driveway and she pulled out, and then I could hear the lights and or the sirens coming. So I ran down the driveway to meet up with the fire truck. And just as they pulled up, gave them the report that everyone was out of the house.
Yeah.
Started helping them like unload hose as fast as I could. Got hose to the front door and the guys opened up the front door and the ceiling collapsed.
Oh my God. That's a close call.
It was literally minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. And as civilians, we don't understand how fire works, right? And I think that when people are in shock, they do the strangest things sometimes, like the fire extinguisher. But I mean, at that point, you didn't see how much the fire had progressed into the ceiling and into the walls.
She couldn't see anything, right?
Yeah.
There was no smoke detectors going off. No, it's a brand new house. So, I mean, fully functioning with those things, but not a stitch of smoke in the house. So, I mean, she can't see flames. She can't see anything. And she's telling her husband that there's a fire, I'm guessing. So he's telling her, "Well, grab a fire extinguisher. It's in the pantry." Not understanding the magnitude of what's was on
going
fire.
on. Yeah. Yeah. Did you ever find out the cause of the fire with that particular house?
It went through investigation and I can't remember the actual cause, but
yeah. I would imagine they were extremely grateful for your diligence in recognizing that there was a crisis.
Yeah, it was I mean, we'd never met or didn't know the neighbors at all. But we are very, very close friends with them now. We have a lifetime connection. She messaged me, I think it was about 3 months after the fire, to say that a beautiful baby boy had been born.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And to let me know that in response to the angels that had saved them, they put my husband and I's initials in his name.
Oh my God. Oh, I'm tearing up over here.
I know. So
yeah. They're there. Wow, that's incredible, Lynnette. And those are the parts of the job I would imagine that were really hard to walk away from, right? Making such a huge difference in people's lives, saving lives, not just making a difference, but saving lives.
Yeah, it was the ultimate reward for the job, that's for sure. It was the ultimate recognition that a person could ever possibly receive. I mean, he will carry our names with him, the story with him for his whole life.
Yeah, that's incredible. Have you had the opportunity to meet the little one yet?
Oh yes. Yeah, we've spent some time with them and got to know them quite well. So
wow, that's incredible. Now, would you say that those are some of the, the driving, like the intrinsic motivation inside of you? Because like going back to the bullying, and all of the things that you experienced, some psychological trauma. Did you want to dig into that? Yeah, because I don't want to say that it's common, but I've definitely heard this before. Not only from yourself, but I also had a friend that was in the fire department as well. And he was ethnic and he experienced a lot of racism and bullying as well. And he also told his story, but it actually got a lot of backlash. It made it to CNN, which really backfired. Like massively backfired because they took snippets or what you would call and they manipulated the story and it was an atrocity. So I mean, it's really it's good that people are, standing in their power and telling their story and making a difference, because these things need to be addressed. They really
Yeah,
need to be addressed. So I would love to hear some of your experiences.
they do need to be addressed. And when I first started at the fire department, there was actually two lawsuits that were happening at the time that I was trying to get on from
Mm,
women in British Columbia who were going through the same thing: bullying, harassment, discrimination,
mhm.
to the extreme on some things. And rightly so, that they were, filing lawsuits. One actually died by suicide,
Oh
which is
no.
absolutely unacceptable
Mhm.
considering, the terms.
Yeah.
And I remember it being brought to my attention when I was trying to get on with the department. And they were like,
Mhm.
see what happens when you hire a female?
Mm,
That was their attitude. And
yeah.
I made a promise, why I don't know, but I did, made a
Mhm.
promise that I would never be that girl. That I would never be like that. I, wanted to do the job, and
Mhm.
I would never cause any trouble. I made them all kinds of promises,
Yeah.
and literally sacrificed myself without even realizing it. And I
Yeah.
made promises, and when I make promises, I keep them. And
Yeah.
so that's how it started.
Yeah. Well, when you join an organization or a department or a detachment or whatever it might be, a big piece of that is like being a part of a community that shares the same values, the camaraderie. And then so for that to kind of get twisted to now where you're being picked on and you're being bullied, like that must have been quite painful.
It became my normal, to be honest.
Mm,
It was actually my mom that had brought it to my attention just a few years ago when we were
mhm.
talking about the stuff. And she said, that was normal for you. Like I would
Yeah.
tell just tiny bits and pieces of things to people, and the
Mm,
look of horror on their faces. And I was like, yeah, actually, saying it out loud, it does sound pretty bad.
mhm.
They were like, what the fuck? Like, how? What? I'm
Yeah.
like, oh, it is what it was. And my mom actually said, like, you made it normal that you were being treated that way.
Yeah.
And the guys
Yeah.
got away with it for so long that it became their normal in how they treated me as
Yeah.
well. And certain individuals, not everyone, but certain
Mhm.
individuals, and how they treated me because they got away with it.
Yeah.
Right. I just kept quiet and did my job.
Yeah. It's interesting, Lynette, because I've always said this too from the oil field. If the
Mm.
consequences are not celebrated, then they're tolerated. But right from that point is where you start to build culture. And even though, like you mentioned, like the rest of the department was not like that, but there was just a few individuals that were now building this culture that you were normalizing. But so when did it kind of, where did you just draw the line though, where you're like, you know what, this is not acceptable. I'm sick of this shit. And like, when did that switch go off?
Just a few years ago, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it just got to the point. I'm the type of person, I will take it, take it, take it, take it. And then when I reach my limit, we're done. Whether
Yeah.
it be friendships, relationships, jobs,
Yeah.
whatever. I was a people pleaser. I will, I'll make it work. I will
Mm-hmm.
make you happy. I will do all of the things. And then I just get to a point where I reach my limit, and then there's no turning back. And so
Mm,
I just reached it, and things had to change in my life because I
yeah.
wasn't living. I
Mm-hmm.
was merely existing. I wasn't thriving. I was surviving barely. And
Yeah.
I was not doing well,
Mm-hmm.
and things had to change. And so I
Yeah.
started on my own journey
Mm-hmm.
of unraveling some things. I had to get really, really honest with myself. Vulnerability was like the worst thing possible for me. I had refused because to me, being vulnerable meant I was weak.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to get honest, and I had to get vulnerable, and I had to actually, start being able to use my voice because it had been silenced. I kept secrets to keep others comfortable for well over a decade.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was physically in pain. I was mentally in pain. I was emotionally in pain.
Yeah.
And something had to change. And I was the
Yeah.
common denominator in all of it. So I had to get honest with myself and what role was I playing in my own suffering?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was allowing it.
And then what type of steps did you take after that realization now? Was it like therapy or coaching or courses? Like what helped you get on this journey?
All of the above.
All of the above?
I did so many different things. Some worked, some didn't. The biggest life-changing piece for me was hypnotherapy.
Oh, interesting.
It it took me to a space where I had kind of no choice but to be honest with myself. I was afraid for anybody else to know my story, to know the truth about what I had actually experienced. I had this big facade. I had, this perfect life. I had this perfect job. I had, all of these things, and I didn't want people to know the truth. And so I had to be able to be in a space where I was telling someone else other than my mom the truth about what I had really experienced. And I followed
Yeah.
this girl on Instagram for over a year. And then one day something in her stories just kind of spoke to me, and I reached out and I was like, let's do it. Like, I know you're in the same town as me, but I'd never met her. So I thought, well, I guess if she knows, and if she ever tells my secret, then I'm SOL, I guess. But I thought, you know what, I have nothing to lose. And
Yeah.
I jumped on it because I was actually willing to be honest in that moment. And I was like,
Yeah.
let's do it.
Yeah.
And so I did multiple sessions of hypnotherapy, and that was the game changer for me.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, I myself have never tried the hypnotherapy, but I'm super curious. I think that's something
Yeah.
I would like to lean into as well. Now, as far as going into the therapy, into the hypnotherapy, were you dealing with like specifically the bullying and whatnot from the job, the psychological injuries, or was it other things from the job like PTSD, with the car wrecks and all the things that you saw on your job on the job?
The things on the job have never impacted me, to be
Mhm.
honest. I've always had healthy coping mechanisms in place for the things on the job because I knew
Mhm.
that I would be experiencing them.
Yeah.
So, but I didn't have any coping mechanisms in place for the bullying, the harassment, the
Yeah.
discrimination, the misogyny. Like, I didn't know what to do with that. I took a lot
Yeah.
of notes. I did a lot of journaling.
Mhm.
I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages of
Mhm.
detailed things of what happened. That was kind of my out. My mom was my sounding board, talked me off the ledge when needed.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I didn't know what to do with it. So I just literally like stuffed it all down and suppressed everything.
Yeah.
And the experiences from the job, I never had like lasting impacts. So I've never
Mhm.
been diagnosed with PTSD.
Mhm.
I always say yet because things can surface years down the road. But
Yes.
thankfully, I have never been impacted of in that way from the jaw.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because there's like what we call the 7 languages of sorrow, like when it comes to death, dying, grief, and loss, which your job you would see a lot of that. And way down the list, number 7 is very common for first responders, and that's filing. We
Mm,
put everything in a box and we stick the lid on it and put it on the shelf, and then one day, possibly not always, but sometimes the shelf falls down, right, and spills the
yeah.
contents of the box. But I mean, you're right though. I mean, there is a certain amount of training that comes with your job, resilience training, and everybody would say, well, I signed up for this, right? But what you
Mm,
weren't expecting was the bullying and the psychological stuff, which I would say would be a lot like betrayal, because here's a group of individuals that you're forming this camaraderie with that are out there that are keeping six, or maybe that's not the right term, but watching your back, and now they're like bullying you, and how could you trust them? Did you trust them when you're out in the field?
So my very first day on the job, I actually had one of the captains come to me and have a private conversation. He took me aside to let me know that they had all had a conversation. They were all in agreement. And I needed to know that if I got myself into any kind of trouble, I was on my own and they were not
Whoa.
coming to save me.
Holy, my heart just sunk.
So mine
Wow.
did. I literally froze in that moment, and I had no idea what to do with that information. I mean, I was the new one. I was the outsider coming into this tight knit brotherhood, and
Mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, I was like, "Holy shit! I'm on my own." And so the ultimate betrayal right from the very beginning, because I mean, betrayal trauma is very personal.
Very.
And I don't know how many times throughout my career they would say to me, "It's not personal, Lynnette." And I'm like, it is personal. It's very personal.
Yeah.
And so they betrayed my trust right from the very beginning. And that
Mm.
was probably the most fearful piece. And
Mm-hmm.
anything that I did on the job, I was questioning who had my back. I hoped, but I didn't know
Mm-hmm.
if I had friends in there. I would hope that if I got myself into some sort of situation that they would come and help me, but
Mm-hmm.
I really didn't know. And I didn't want to ever put myself in a position where I had to find out if what he said was
Wow.
true or not.
Yeah. Yeah, that must have been quite fearful, thinking, knowing that these guys didn't actually have your back with comments like that. Yeah, that's rough.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was it
Yeah.
was hard. I did a lot of self-talk when I
Mm-hmm.
was in certain situations or in certain areas with calls. I'm like, okay, you got
Mm-hmm.
this. Just stay back a little bit. Don't go in too far. Don't get yourself into trouble. You can do it. You can do it. And I would like
Yeah.
literally talk myself through things.
Yeah. Wow. Did it ever like kind of hinder your job though by not really fully engaging just because you had that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's tough.
I believe that I never, for many years, I shouldn't say
Mm-hmm.
never, because it did come out where I was able to actually flourish in my
Mm-hmm.
position
Yes.
under the leadership of some incredible people. But
Mm-hmm.
in the beginning, I definitely didn't get to do the job to my fullest capabilities because I was holding myself back because I was
Mm-hmm.
scared.
Yeah. 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 And I don't imagine that's a job that you'd want to be fearful all the time. Like, every time the bell would ring, you'd probably, your heart would skip. Mind you, it probably would anyways, but
Mhm.
yeah. And it's
Yeah.
interesting because like even my friend, I won't mention any names, but the gentleman that I mentioned earlier, he was at the department and they used to actually sabotage his gear so
Mm.
that when the fire alarms would ring in the fire station and everybody was getting ready to get on the truck, he couldn't find things. Like they hid things on him or they would sabotage his gear and then the truck would leave without him. And then he would be
I can.
Yeah, and then he would be super shamed when they got back, basically pointing the finger at him and it was his fault. And it was terrible. It was terrible. And it's interesting because I would have never in a million years would have thought that this type of behavior would be happening in positions where you're saving people's lives. Like
Yeah, I can't even imagine being put in that position. That is awful.
yeah.
We were a small enough department that nobody could get left behind. So if
Mhm.
they were to have ever sabotaged anybody's gear, they would be sabotaging their own response time because they couldn't leave without everyone.
Ah, interesting. Yeah.
So I can't imagine what that would feel like in being left behind and
Yeah.
shamed.
Oh, it affected him deeply, put it that way, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and then there you are without you've got one less set of hands that could potentially be saving your life
Totally.
or somebody's, civilian life. So it just didn't quite make sense to me, like why anybody would think that that was okay. But I do want to go back to the part where you said you were suppressing things.
Mhm.
and just shoving it down, right? Because as a therapist, I know the consequences of shoving things down, suppressing things. Eventually they blow up somewhere. Have you experienced anything where anger, rage? Uh-oh. There's a story
So
here.
many things. Well,
Yeah.
anger was my go-to.
Mm-hmm.
I was told in the beginning of my career that I was not allowed to cry.
Mm-hmm.
I was asked what I would do when I seen a dead body, or if I had ever seen a dead body. And I said, no, I haven't. And they said, well, what are you going to do when you do see one? I said, well, I have no idea because I have never experienced that.
Yeah.
So I won't know until it happens.
Mm-hmm.
And he very sternly looked me in the face and said, I'll tell you what you're not going to do. You're not going to cry. And I
Yeah.
said, okay. And I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
For many years, I didn't.
Right.
But anger was culturally and socially acceptable. And so I would completely lose it, like explosive anger, punch holes in the walls, um,
Wow.
pick my son's bike up and throw it across the yard.
Ouch.
Yeah.
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 It was my biggest regret, honestly.
Yeah. And I definitely
It's,
observed a little bit of emotion coming up there, right? It's yeah.
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 Yeah. Things that,
Was he old enough to be affected by that? Were you able to kind of rectify?
oh, yeah, I mean, he knows the amount of work that mom has done. And
Yeah.
I have, tried to change things when he wants to be angry as his initial
Mm-hmm.
response.
Mm-hmm.
Um, now I cry at the drop of a hat.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. Yeah. Cause I'm,
But yeah,
I'm, a,
anger.
yeah, I'm a lot like you that way, Lynnette. I had a lot of rage and anger and I suppressed so much stuff, but it definitely leaks out in the strangest places, right? Sometimes you're like, oh my God, I feel like I'm losing my mind.
Mhm.
But what people don't realize is that this stuff does bubble up to the surface eventually. So, yeah,
Yeah, many times I felt like I was going crazy
yeah,
because I mean, it didn't matter what it was. I was mad.
yeah. How did
To
that
be the
affect your
time,
relationships?
a lot,
Mm-hmm.
a lot. And I isolated myself as well. I didn't want to be
Mm,
around people. I had trust issues with everyone.
yeah.
My marriage, my friends.
Mm-hmm.
I had issues in my marriage from, obviously, I would have explosive anger, punch holes in the walls. You'd
Yeah.
hear her bang downstairs and my husband would be like, what's going on? And I'm like, I
Mm-hmm.
just need the drywall mud. Don't ask questions. Just
Oh, shoot. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So, what would you say to somebody right now that's watching, that may be struggling with some anger and rage? Like, what would you tell them?
Mm. Start talking about it, for
Start
starters. That's what
talking.
I did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Every time
Yeah.
that I started to notice, like I had to acknowledge and notice what was happening in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
And then I would have to actually start talking about what was really going on, because what was actually happening around me was not what was really impacting me.
Mm.
Acknowledging where I felt it in my body.
Yes.
So the biggest thing is, don't keep it in and just let it explode and then walk away from it. You need to actually start talking about it.
Yes. Start to process it for sure. Yes.
Yeah.
That's excellent advice. And as a therapist, that's exactly what I say too. And I think that, especially with men, because I think that anger is viewed as inappropriate. There's a lot of intensity behind it. So people walk on eggshells or they're fearful
Mhm.
of it. So people are told to, like, don't you show your anger because that's not appropriate. However, what happens is it just starts stacking up until the volcano blows. Anger does need to be expressed and it can be expressed, but in a very safe and protected
Mhm.
space, like in therapy or in group coaching or whatever it is, because anger does need to be expressed. And I'm sure you've seen the anger iceberg, where anger is at the tip of the iceberg, where everything below the surface is fear, overwhelm, shame, grief, that eventually creates anger in order to, it's a protective measure.
Totally. And once I actually started understanding why I was so angry, and it was
Mm-hmm.
because I had loss of control. I had absolutely no control over the things that were happening around me. And I was
Yes.
terrified 24/7. Like I was just
Yeah.
living in a state of fear all the time. And so
Yeah.
anger, I was mad because and I had suppressed my truth. So I was not
Mm-hmm.
only lying to everyone around me, but I was lying to myself.
Mm.
So I had all kinds of things to be mad about. And
Yeah.
there's ways to have, like you said, healthy anger,
Mm-hmm.
because I mean, it's an emotion that is legit and it does
Yeah.
need to be expressed, but in a healthy form. And
Yeah.
mine was not.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I actually have had the pleasure of working with different therapists that are now instructors. They do both. And I have one instructor who takes her clients to smash rooms.
Mm,
And I do realize, though, that sometimes that may not be appropriate for everyone because you can definitely blow someone out of their window of tolerance. And then it takes quite a bit of work to get them to back to
yeah.
homeostasis in a sense, right? So you do have to be careful in situations like that. But I personally reacted very well in expressing my anger. And I was able to beat the crap out of a punching bag with a rolled up yoga mat for safety. I wanted to hit it with my fists, but they wouldn't let me. So I had to use the rolled up yoga mat. But you know what? It worked quite well. So so if anybody's watching that, is struggling with anger, there's definitely modalities out there that can,
Mm,
we like to say kind of take one little brick out of the dam and relieve some of that pressure,
yeah.
and then
Yeah.
we
I
can.
went to kickboxing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
that's actually what I did. I was in Muay Thai for a little while, and that's why I wanted to hit the bag with my fists and do some kicks. But they're like, "Oh no, 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 safety, safety!" And but however, when I started to hit the bag, everybody backed up.
Yeah.
Yeah, everybody backed up, and it worked really well for sure. Well, that's excellent, Lynette. It's so inspiring to hear your story, speaking your truth, and now taking the steps to make a difference in people's lives, and that includes like your own healing journey.
Mhm.
Yeah. And like, how is that journey going? Because you know what? The work is never done.
Oh, it's never done. It's a
It's
roller
never done.
coaster ride.
I feel
Right.
like,
Just when you think you got it, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, here we go.
yeah.
We're going down again.
Yeah. Do you feel like the more you know, the deeper you dig, the sometimes the worse it gets. And then it's like, oh my
Yeah.
God. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's going exceptionally well.
Hmm.
I, for the first time in many, many, many years, I'm relaxed. I enjoy
Ah.
myself. Like I could not
Mhm.
ever just sit and do nothing. And now I'm okay to just sit and be.
Yeah.
I could never be by myself. Now I love to be by myself.
Yeah.
I can spend time alone. I went on a trip to Mexico by myself just to have the opportunity to sit with myself, not
Mm.
join in, not be invited to dinners with other people, to just
How
literally
did that
be.
go, Lynette?
It was amazing. It was literally the best gift I
Yeah.
gave myself, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. Was
Yeah.
there was there a little bit of a rupture though, where you had to call a friend? Our
See, you
mutual
knowing things ahead of time is not good.
our mutual
Yep.
friend Kelly, who definitely helped you ground.
Oh, she was an angel. Seriously,
Yeah.
she answered my SOS call, and yeah, I just was in all of a sudden in a panic. And of course I was there on a full moon too, which didn't
Mm.
help. Or maybe it did.
Yeah.
It didn't and it did. And yeah, I just started having, these panics, and I caught wind that the airline was going to be shutting down, and I
Mhm.
needed to get home, and I needed to get home right now. And so she was my call of safety and talked me off the ledge and had me, do some very calming, grounding exercises and bring myself back to the present moment, because I was bouncing back and forth from the past to the future. I was completely out of
Yeah.
control on those things, obviously, and bringing me back to the present moment, and
Yeah.
had me really deep dive into what was some things that I wanted to experience on the trip and why I was there to begin with,
Yeah.
and some things that I wanted to leave behind and leave them there. And so I did that. And then I was totally good for the next couple of days to finish out my
Yeah.
trip. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. And
it
thank you
takes a
for sharing.
village.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And everybody
Right?
brings their own unique gifts. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And and the reason why I kind of wanted to do a little bit of a deeper dig into that is because people have to understand that you really do have to sit in the quiet in order to heal, because we're living in a culture now that is so distracted. I mean, now there's like you can do your screen time check and you can actually see how many times you've picked up your phone.
Oh, I don't even want to know.
And so there's so many distractions, and I like to call those painkillers. People are self-soothing through all kinds of things, busy being busy. And just because it seems like it's progress and that we're actually doing something, there is such a thing as busy being busy, because is it actually getting you closer to your goals? It's like, no, I got to scrub the bathroom tub one more time this week. And it's like,
Yeah,
actually, no, you don't. But
that
people
was
can't.
me.
Yeah, me too. I always had a
Yeah.
project. Every corner of my
Oh,
house, I had some sort of like craft project or a writing project, but they were all unfinished. And then I realized that these are just distractions. And it's hard to
oh,
hear
yeah.
that
I
sometimes.
was constantly distracted. I was a workaholic. I was busy doing
Yeah.
everything. I had multiple to-do lists on the go all the
Mhm.
time. It was unbelievable, but all I did was busy myself right into a burnout. That's all I did.
Exactly. Exactly. And when we talk about the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, flop, there's a lot of characteristics or behaviors, I should actually call it, in those categories that I recognize every single one of them because I've been every single
So
one of
did
them.
I. Same.
Perfectionism, workaholic, and then eventually, though, you come to this flop where it's like, oh my God, like what's wrong with me? I have no energy. I don't enjoy the things that I love. Like, pulling yourself out of a dark hole. And people have to realize that no, there's nothing really broken. There's nothing really wrong with you, but your nervous system is completely flatlined. You're in dorsal, which is now a complete
Oh,
flop.
totally.
Yeah. Did you ever experience
Yeah.
that too, where you just lost all motivation?
Oh, everything. Yeah, I wasn't
Yeah.
sleeping.
Mm,
Trying to make myself go to the gym, trying to have enough energy to do things with my
yeah.
son. It was, but I had a million things on the to-do list that had to be done. So it was like, I have to do this. I have to, and then the brain fog, and I had no memory. And
Yeah.
yeah, I couldn't focus on tasks. I couldn't think clearly. It
Yeah.
was horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's when your nervous system kind of hits that low tone dorsal, the brain fog, disassociation, where it's like you do not feel like yourself anymore. But we've been
Oh,
operating up here for so long that now we're down here. It's like, it's almost a scary place because well, it feels like depression. It is probably depression, right? Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea who I was anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Now, kind of maybe going back a little bit, with the Fire Within Crisis Services Incorporated, how did you come up with that name? Because that's a
I
brilliant
actually
name. I love that name. Sorry, but yeah.
I actually just started using the hashtag the fire within is how it started,
Mm,
like just on posts and things that I was
mhm.
doing. And then when I decided to create a company, because I was doing things kind of in the shadows, I had been the peer support team leader at the fire department for 9 years.
Ah.
So I had an interest, but I wanted to take things further. I was like, there has to be more to this. I want to do more. I was extremely passionate about it. I seen the results that happened.
Mhm,
And so I kind of started going off and doing my own certifications on the side and getting extra education and
mhm.
doing all those things. And then all of a sudden one day it was like, I need to do this on a
Yeah.
deeper level, and I need to start my own company. And it just it was just immediate. Like
Yeah.
I knew Fire Within had to be in it, but I didn't know exactly what the name was going to be. And
Yeah.
yeah, crisis. And then there's multiple services that I do. So that's how it was born.
Yeah. Did you recognize though that your fellow colleagues and whatnot, and other people from other, like say the RCMP or ambulance services, were you noticing that there was a lot of people suffering?
Oh, there's an unacceptable amount of people that are suffering.
Yeah.
There is no training for this
Mm,
mental side of the job. Like they give us all of the PPE for the outside to protect us in
mm,
any situation. But right from fire school, there is nothing for training for the inside. Like there is nothing to prepare you other than, this
mhm.
is part of the job and this is what you could see. And it's
Yeah.
not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And
Mhm.
I believe that it has to be mandatory training in RCMP, ambulance, fire, nursing, like all of these first responder situations, that this is what you are going to endure.
Yeah.
And these are the things that you're going to need to have in place to
Yeah.
protect yourself. Like one thing I talk to a lot of my clients, and when I'm teaching the courses and stuff, I always say to everyone, have a therapist or somebody that you can trust in place when you don't need them
Mm,
for the small things.
yeah.
Have that rapport and stuff built up. It's like, having a good hairdresser. Like
Yeah.
you want to have one in place
Mhm.
for when you want to do the big dramatic change, right? You
Yeah.
want to have that already established. But it's hard to find one. And you don't
Yeah.
want to find one when you're in desperate need,
Yeah.
because not everybody is a good fit for everyone. I mean, I
Yeah.
went through multiple therapists
Me
and
too.
counselors and
Yeah.
all of the things before I found, a really good fit.
Yes.
And so you want to have that already done for the small things, because it's not just going to be the job that's going to impact you. You're going to have
Mhm.
crisis in your life that
Yes.
we can't get away from it. So have that in place. And then when the big things happen, it's already established. You have that safe resource that you can go to immediately, because we all know now what wait times are happening with anything
Yeah.
and everything. Trying to
Yes.
get in on a moment's notice. That's one thing I pride myself in being a trauma
Mhm.
coach. So I have a very flexible, open schedule,
Mhm.
and I can usually see people like immediately or within like a day or two.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah. And you know what, Lynnette,
Because that's,
yeah, sorry. I'm just so glad that you mentioned that,
yeah,
that having that therapist kind of as part of your contact list, because I always say that to clients too. I'm like, here's the tools, but practice them every day so that when you are in a crisis situation, it comes second nature. Like the breath work or the grounding or the containment or whatever it is, but don't just say,
mm-hmm.
yeah, 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 okay. And then now you're in a crisis moment and it's like, this isn't working.
Right,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah. And sorry,
yeah, exactly.
I kind of walked on you there though, but what were you
No,
going? Yeah.
I I see. I lost it. I don't know.
Oh shit, I shouldn't have interrupted you. It's I'm just so passionate about what you're saying. It's hard for me not to jump in.
But
Yeah.
we have all of those other things in place, right? You have a doctor, you have, an
Yes.
optometrist, you have, all
Mhm.
of these things in place for yourself.
Yeah.
But when it comes to the mental health aspect, I don't know if it's the stigma or what it is around
Mhm.
it, but you're going to experience crisis and trauma and high stress situations in your life at some point
Mhm.
or multiple times.
Yes.
So having those resources in place for your own
Mhm.
security, man, it's so valuable.
Yeah, it's so valuable. And like even part of my program, the curriculum was basically the wellness courses, which was, physical wellness, which is not what you think. It's not about the physical, like, getting exercise. Well, it was, but not entirely. But it was mostly physical, about like learning what physical sensations are showing up in the body when you are in
Mm-hmm.
shame, what's going on in the body. So physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. There was four wellnesses, and even the spiritual part I think is really important because that helps people give purpose and meaning to what's going on in their life. You know what I mean? Like when it comes to death, dying, grief, and loss, like there's got to be a bigger purpose. So that's kind of where the spiritual part comes in.
Right.
Yeah.
people think that healing is just, I'm just going to heal the mental part of or the emotional part.
Yeah.
And you can't do just one. You don't get to pick and choose. You have to literally do all of them because they are connected.
Yes.
Like one of the big pieces for me was I was in so much physical pain, but I'm very physically fit. So I was like, why do I have such bad, lower back pain? I had an eye twitch that didn't go away for months at a time. Like I had so many things going on. Tests were run. Everything was normal. Right.
Yeah.
So then you start thinking, well, it's just in my head. Never once was I asked, what kind of trauma have you endured? What kind of stress are you under? Like what kind of emotions have you suppressed?
Yes.
And when I went through the hypnotherapy pieces and I actually started expressing the emotions and the things that needed to come out, not just the anger, but actually allowing all of the emotions to surface, the things that I had filed, I had to open those boxes and go through those files.
Yep.
Once I did that, eye twitch went away, lower back pain went away, like all of those physical pieces. It was like, that's what that was.
Yeah. Well, psychosomatic symptoms are a thing. And, and some of the leading psychologists that I follow, like, even the Jordan Petersons and whatnot, they talk about that all the time. There is such a thing as psychosomatic symptoms, and they are deeply rooted in trauma. Deeply rooted.
Yeah. When you suppress your emotions, they attach themselves to your tissues and your organs.
Absolutely.
They will cause you dis-ease at some point in your life.
Yeah.
Guaranteed. You can't escape it. You can't run away from it. You can't gamble it away. You can't, drug it away, drink it away. Like you go with you everywhere you go. And you just you can change jobs. You can get out of your relationships. You can move to a new town, but you go with you everywhere you go. And if you're not willing to face yourself.
Yeah. And then my other recent guest, Dennis Saliski, he, with Good Vibe Rising, he had a shaman play the didgeridoo over his body. And he had the same experience when it hit a certain part of the body where it was storing trauma. He had a major release. And then that day forward, He's like, this is what I'm doing. That was his calling. As soon as he was able to experience the results of that, he was like, this is what I want to do now. So it's interesting how the wounded warriors are now stepping up. So it's beautiful.
Yeah. I feel like that aligns with myself as well.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
I've turned my wounds into wisdom, and I feel like I wouldn't be able to do what I am doing and have the impact that I'm having without the personal experience to back it up.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Excellent. So let's talk about your own nervous system healing. Like when you were on the job or on call, did you ever notice like your nervous system being completely dysregulated?
Oh, all the time. I packed a pager. So it would go off. It would go off in the grocery store. It would go off in the middle of the night while I was sleeping. It would go off. I mean, you can't plan an emergency, so it would just scare the crap out of you out of a dead sleep. There was many times I would be sleeping and I would literally jump out of bed because I thought that I heard it go off. And it didn't. I know multiple people that had actually like drove down to the fire station. Not even in mine particular, but other stations, people that I've talked to, and they're like, yeah, I got all the way down there and there was nobody there. Like you just think that there's a call happening. So very dysregulated.
Oh God, I can't even imagine like losing sleep like that and then trying to function daily, running on empty. Yeah.
And I worked 2 days and 2 nights. And so I'd work my day shift and then I was on call all night. So I was the departments for those 4 shifts. And then I'd be on call all day and then work all night. And sometimes there would be calls throughout the night. So I would work all day and then only come home for a couple hours. And then we would have, multiple incidents, structure fires, things that would last 10, 12 hours. So I would be at work all night long and then have to be back on shift first thing the next morning.
Oh my God.
So they would release those that had to work, get on shift, give us the opportunity to go and grab some food, get showered, and then be back to work. So there was massive sleep disruptions.
Yeah. And I would like to, I'm probably, maybe I'm assuming, but I would assume that you did take fairly good physical care of yourself, like, nutrition, going to the gym, which maybe helped a little bit.
I've always said that the gym is my therapy. I
Mm-hmm.
can go in, or a kickboxing class, or something like that, a spin class, go in
Yeah.
and I can walk in with a head full of stuff and I can literally leave it there.
Yeah.
So the gym has always been my space. Thank goodness.
Yeah.
I think that is something that saved me throughout my years with my
Mm-hmm.
career. I always did that. I did get into unhealthy coping, of course. I,
Mm-hmm.
had no problem eating a bag of chips and drinking a bottle of wine at night.
Yeah.
That went on for quite some time. So there was,
Mm-hmm.
weight gain and stuff. But for the most part, definitely, I'm also a personal trainer and nutritionist. So I know
Mm-hmm.
better and I
Mm-hmm.
know how to use those things.
Mm-hmm.
So I have always used them.
Yeah. What were your observations amongst some of your colleagues? Were they coping with healthy coping mechanisms? No.
No, no,
What
I
did you
watched
observe?
a lot of self-destruction, a lot of
Mm,
self-sabotage, a lot of
yeah.
unhealthy coping.
Yeah.
Um, people just turning a blind eye to it. I
Mhm.
don't know. A lot of times I feel like being the only female there,
Yeah.
that I could see things from a different perspective, or I, watched in a different way.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of things that other people either refused to see or didn't
Mhm.
see.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I watched a lot of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you say unhealthy coping mechanism, like was there lots of drinking and was there drugs,
Yeah.
pharmaceutical drugs? Yeah. Yeah.
I would guess.
Hmm.
I never dove into it.
Yeah.
But I mean, you have to be willing to ask for help. You have to be
Hmm.
willing to, say enough is enough.
Yeah.
And so I never got into that, but definitely drinking. I would be driving by the liquor store and see multiple vehicles of,
Mm,
the guys from work first thing
yeah.
in the morning, as soon as
Yeah.
the liquor store opened.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's rough. Yeah. And just going back to what I had said earlier about if the consequences are not celebrated, then they're tolerated. And then that becomes the new norm, which is
Yeah.
really hard because it's not normal. Drinking and doing the drugs or whatever it is, the unhealthy coping mechanisms truly is just a bit of a painkiller. I like to call it the painkiller, but it definitely does not make things any better. It makes it worse.
Oh, absolutely. It does. Yeah.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
I also would like to just say that there are a lot of them within the department that
Mhm.
did have healthy coping, that,
Mm,
were men of honor and
mhm,
integrity. And it wasn't everyone.
mhm.
Being a small department, you could see things a lot different.
Yeah,
Um, so not everyone gets painted with the same brush
of course.
in all the
Mhm.
aspects, but there were some self-destructing, and then there were some that were,
Yeah.
totally great and totally healthy and had healthy coping mechanisms put in place, utilized the peer support team, took things like that very seriously,
Mm,
looked out for their fellow brothers.
yeah.
And for me as well,
Hmm.
I do have some great friends that I made,
Yeah.
some lifelong friendships within the department.
Yeah.
So not everyone was the same.
Yeah. And are you noticing any changes? Like since people are starting to stand up and tell their stories and try to make a difference, have you noticed any changes?
Changes within
Like just
myself or changes within
yeah, like more support for the first responders.
within my department, it's kind of like half and half.
Yeah. Just
There's
because
some.
yeah, just because I do follow some other profiles that are also very active in telling their story and trying to, give veterans and first responders some more support. But the suicide statistics are rising and they don't seem to be slowing down. So it's kind of a sense of urgency here that things need to change.
They needed to change a long time ago. And the fact
Yes.
that our suicide numbers are increasing is absolutely unacceptable. But I
Unacceptable.
feel like the agencies and the organizations, they hide behind an employee assistance program.
Mm,
So they're not bringing in, the actual resources that their people need. And they are
mhm.
not so involved with their people and knowing like what is really going on. And some of it
Right.
is not even just work related. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of we have personal lives too.
Yeah.
And you can show up for work and be in a really bad headspace from your personal life, but yet you're,
Mm,
you know, faking it, and your
yeah.
partner has no idea. And so there has to be communication. There has to be changes made
Yeah.
within these organizations, instead of just saying, well, if you're having trouble, there's a card on the wall for the employee assistance program, and you know,
Yeah.
we pay for it, so call them.
Yeah.
Like that doesn't do it. It's
Yeah.
not doing it. It's not working.
Yeah. And, and I'm so glad you brought that up, right? Because it's so, so true. If you just grab that card and call the 1-800 number, it can be really confusing for people to know what modality to even go for. You know what I mean? There's so many different resources that sometimes you can get lost and almost confused. So, like, even just navigating the directory, I feel like people could use some assistance in.
Well, that, and you're only talking to a dispatch person who's going
Yes.
to then put the call through to,
Yeah.
you know, a therapist, and then you're going to get a call back.
Hmm.
When people need help and they're actually making that call, they need help right now.
Yes. Agreed.
It's not a, you know, a 2 week wait. We've
Hmm.
missed the window if that's the case.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I really love that you brought that part in too. It's not always about the atrocities that happen on the job, but in their personal lives. Because even as a safety officer in the oil field, when I was investigating certain incidents, it didn't matter that there was like a job hazard assessment. It didn't matter that there was a policy and or a procedure. It didn't matter. It started becoming, hey, buddy, how's everything at home? Oh, I see. Yeah, not well, hey? How's your kids doing in school? Oh, yeah, not well, hey? Meanwhile, they're out in the middle of freaking nowhere. They can't, and they can't really just leave unless they quit their job. And then meanwhile, the family's falling apart at home. Like it was tough. It was rough.
It
Yeah.
is. And
Yeah.
those things all play a part.
Mm-hmm.
And then you show up for work and you're supposed to be, you know, at your best and be able to respond super fast, and you got your partners counting on you, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't know what's really going on in your mind. Like,
Yeah.
we need to be able to have that communication. I
Yeah.
don't know, whether it be sit down at the beginning of the shift and say, you
Mhm.
know, I always say to people, if you're going to ask somebody, how are you? Mean it.
Mean it. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. Like, how are you really?
Yes. Yes.
Because so often we're like, hey, how are you? And you're like, good. You're like, oh, yeah, good. And then it's
Hmm.
just in passing. It's like a greeting.
Yeah.
But if you're going to ask somebody, how are you? Be prepared for the answer,
Hmm.
and have the time to be able to, you know,
Yeah.
hold space for that person. But how are you really?
Yeah. Agreed. Yeah, that's so good. This is amazing, Lynette. I just absolutely support the work that you're doing 100%. I want to yell it from the rooftops. But one thing though in our conversation earlier, I do want to touch on this is like the highlight, one of the big highlights of your job in the parade. I just love
Yeah.
that. I just love that story because I was, when I was little, that was exciting.
Yeah. Me too. And even as an adult, it's exciting. Like,
Yes.
so every year we have a fall fair parade,
Hmm.
where people can put in floats and all the things. And the fire trucks are always in there, ambulance, police as well.
Hmm.
And I love driving the fire truck in the
Yeah.
parade. I mean, I love
Yeah.
driving the fire truck,
Hmm.
period. That was just something that was always exciting to me. And I loved to drive. And so many departments, you don't get the opportunity to be a driver. So I'm very thankful that I got that opportunity to be the driver, the pump operator, all of the things. But driving in the parade and being the only female in the department, and I was there full time for 14 years, people were still like, "There's a girl. There's a girl driving." Like, guys, people were still shocked to see me, and I'm like, "I've been here
Hmm.
for 10 years." Like,
That's
but the
awesome.
little kids, like being able to, you know, see them waving, and they're
Hmm.
so excited to see, and knowing that a girl can do it too. We would have
Yeah.
tours come into the fire hall, and those were my favorite, is being able
Oh
to talk
yeah.
to the kids. And so many times I would have the kids say, are you scared? Like, does the job scare you? And I was like, nah, I'm big and tough. And you could just see the little girls with their eyes all wide. And then I would get so many messages from parents
Mhm.
or people out in the community, and they would say, oh, we seen you driving the fire truck today. And my daughter was like, Mom, there's a girl driving. And I'm like, girls can do it too. So being
Yeah.
able to show them that girls can do it too, I loved that.
Yeah.
And the one little girl that still sticks in my mind, she came up and she hugged me, like basically wrapped around my leg because she was so little.
Aw.
And she looked right up at me and she said, I want to be just like you when I grow up.
Aw.
I was
Yeah.
like, you definitely should be a firefighter. Yes.
That's awesome. Now, with that being said, that I want to be just like you when I grow up, what advice would you give them if somebody was to come to you right now and say, hey, I'm thinking about joining a department? What would you say?
Do it. It's the
Yeah.
best job in the world. Yes.
Yeah.
Literally, it was the best job in the world. You never know
Mhm.
if you like change, because you never know what your day is going to entail. And
Right.
I love change. I am not the type of person that can do the exact same thing day in, day out.
Mhm.
You never knew what was going to happen when the tones would go off. What was it going to be? Was it going to be a
Yeah.
medical? Was it going to be a vehicle extrication? Was it going to
Yeah.
be a structure fire? What was it going to be?
Yeah.
So I would tell them to absolutely do it.
Yeah.
And
Exciting.
don't listen to the noise, because there's always going to be noise.
Hmm.
There's always going to be people that have judgments and opinions and think they know better than you. And if it's your dream, go
Hmm.
all in on it and go after it.
I love that. So, Lynnette, you took an early retirement. Is there a reason why?
I did take an early retirement.
Mhm.
I wasn't planning on it, but I had reached a point in my healing journey, like we talked about earlier, where I felt like I couldn't go any further without being able to tell my story. And I couldn't tell my story if I was still employed.
Oh, okay.
So I had to make the decision to put myself first for the first time in many, many years. And I needed to be able to tell the truth and tell my
Mhm.
story. And so I let go of the career that I loved in order for that to happen.
Wow. That takes a lot of courage. It's a huge sacrifice too to walk away from something that you love so much. But
But I had to love me more for the
yeah,
first time ever.
yeah,
Yeah.
you
And
did it for all the right reasons.
I did. And I missed a lot with my son in the
Yeah.
beginning parts of his life, being on call, working shift
Mhm.
work. My husband and I both work shift work. So I missed a lot. And now he's in a phase of, you know, competitive sports and needing to go to tournaments out of town all the time. And I, with having seen things in my job,
Yeah.
won't allow him to ride in cars on the highway with other people.
Oh,
So I have
interesting.
I have the opportunity now to take him to all of those things. I don't miss the basketball practices. I don't miss the basketball tournaments. I get to be there. I get to make my schedule. I have that time freedom
Yeah.
and I get to be there. I get to choose. And
Yeah.
it's the best thing I ever did for myself and
Yeah.
my family.
Wow. Yeah, that's a good sacrifice. You know what I mean? Because family does come
Yeah.
first, yourself included, right? Like you come first. And
And they didn't for my
yeah,
entire career. My
yeah,
career was everything. It was my identity. It came first before everything.
yeah,
And enough was enough.
yeah. Good for you though. Good for you. Yeah. And that was similar to the oil field too. Gone all the time. Gone all the time. I missed out on so much. So I kind of want to touch on that because of the things that I've seen out on the highways and stuff. Like I won't let my kid ride with just anybody. Do you find that now you go out into civilian life? Do you see a lot of things that people are doing that are just ridiculously unsafe?
Oh yeah. I seen them before. I
Hmm.
was, always I'm always watching all the
Yeah,
things going around. I'm a people watcher, always
me
have been.
too. Yeah,
So I see a lot. So
yeah,
that hasn't changed.
yeah. 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 It's so true. Like after my safety experience, like I can't even go into anywhere, like an establishment, and I'm already looking at the fire extinguisher tag to make sure that it's been inspected or whatever. I can't shut it off. you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And I went to so many motor vehicle incidents out on the
Mm,
highway, right? Distracted drivers, all the things. And
yes.
not wearing seatbelts or improper tires so
Mhm.
there's so many things that if you were to go with somebody else, like I'd be checking their tires, I'd be checking their seatbelts, I'd be checking all of the
Yeah.
things. So I just do it myself. I feel safe. I
Yeah.
feel confident in my own driving, and he goes with me
Yeah. That's
or
excellent.
my
And
husband.
yeah. And I don't blame you. I absolutely don't blame you. And like I have the same experience too. Like that's the first thing I look for too is the tire tread, inflation, underinflated, overinflated. I'm like, oh my God, like that car is not even shouldn't even be on the road. Another big one that I just cringe is when I see people pulling trailers and they're overloaded, the truck isn't big enough or whatever. It's just, oh my God, I cringe every time I'm out on the highway and I see that. Imagine you've seen a few of
Oh,
those.
we went to multiple and we're very windy where I
Mm,
live.
yeah.
And the wind with those holiday trailers, and it will literally
Yes.
pick that vehicle right up off the highway and flip it.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I'm kind of like that myself now too, where I won't ride with just anybody. No. And I'm always that person too that always had a plan B. Like, say, for instance, our friends, we go to like a concert. I'm like, even before my safety experience, I was always the one that had to put together a plan. Okay, if something goes wrong, this is plan A. And if that fails, we have plan B, and they're like, why are you so paranoid like that? And sure enough, never failed. We'd always end up having to use some of those skills, right? Being
Yeah.
separated or whatever. Yeah.
I'm more
Interesting.
of an on the fly kind of person. Like
Yeah.
I like to think on the fly and problem solve. And I think that's part of how the job was too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you were made for it. Okay. So the book.
The book.
Yeah, just in our conversation, we're talking about the book. You just started writing the book. And tell our viewers what's coming up when writing the book.
I have always said that I would write a book someday.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know what it was going to be about. And I am writing a memoir telling my story
Ooh,
from from all of the depth, from all of the
wow.
angles,
Yeah.
the things that I've never spoke out loud, the
Mm.
things I've never shared, the truths I've never told, um, my truth,
Yeah.
my perspective, my story. And yeah, I started writing it in January.
Mhm.
I'm 64,000 words in, which is
Excellent.
shocking to me.
Good job. That's excellent because that's a lot.
It is. I didn't know
Mhm.
that I had that many words in me. I've never had the opportunity to know how many words are in a book. I
Yeah.
wish they put it inside the cover, like this book contains 80,000 words so that you would know,
Mm-hmm.
because I know what I want the book to look like, what I want it to feel like, how
Mm.
I have the visualization of all of those things. I just
Yeah.
kind of have a guesstimate on what the word count is going to entail to fill
Mm.
that.
Yeah. Excellent. Yeah. And so while you're writing the book, though, what's coming up?
Oh, it's like therapy. It
Mm,
is.
interesting.
It has been therapy for me. I've had some moments of not reliving, but having to
Mm-hmm.
actually immerse myself back into pieces
Mm-hmm.
and sit with it.
Yeah.
I was struggling for a while because I would write and then I would feel very rejected, and I couldn't figure
Mm.
out for the longest time what was actually causing that.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a conversation with a girlfriend, and I'm like, I need to get some coping skills or tools. Can you help
Mm-hmm.
me out? And she was like, well, you're the queen of coping, so I don't know what I can help you with. But I said, when I sit down and I write, and even just talking about it, I actually solved my own problem and figured out,
Mm-hmm.
what was going on. But I sit down and I write, and I'm spilling all of these vulnerable details
Yes.
to a computer screen.
Mm-hmm.
And then I sit there and I'm not getting any feedback.
Mm.
So it's like telling your best friend your deepest, darkest secrets. And then I'm just sitting there staring at you with a blank stare. And you're like, say
Yeah.
something.
Right.
So I was like, oh, that's what it is I am literally opening myself up and I'm
Yeah.
dumping all of this and I'm being insanely vulnerable and I'm not getting anything back.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that was a big realization for me, and that
Mm-hmm.
changed how I looked at it and how I responded to it after, for
Yeah.
sure. But
Yeah.
I have most of the writing done. I have pretty much the whole story written out
Mm-hmm.
in point, not point form, but in kind of the
Yeah.
Cliff Notes version in some senses,
Of course.
because
Yeah.
that's the only way I had ever told it,
Mm-hmm.
is just bits and pieces here and there. And so to put
Yeah.
it all together, and now I'm going back through and filling in like the actual details of the locations, of the feelings, of, you know, the expression, how things actually impacted me
Yeah.
in those moments.
Yeah.
And like I said, I have hundreds and hundreds of pages of notes, because I kept notes on everything,
Mm-hmm.
never knowing what I was going to ever need them for. This is what they were for. So
Wow.
I have all of the details, and going back through those things, even in my
Yeah.
journals and my notes, it's like, oof,
Mm-hmm.
oof, like that was
Yeah.
so bad. Oh, that was so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
And
interesting
then
though,
being able
you
to
know.
actually,
Sorry, go ahead.
so being able to actually express it now
Mm-hmm.
and tell it. And I'm
Yeah.
hoping that, like, I am very fortunate. I am one of the, they say it's 10% of
Mm-hmm.
people that will come out with post-traumatic growth. And
Mm.
I am very fortunate to be one of those people.
Yeah.
And I have come out the other side stronger, better, faster. And I want to be able to use this as a tool for other people to be able to see that they can come through it too. Like, I went
Yes.
through all of these experiences. These are the things that
Mm-hmm.
were said and done.
Mm-hmm.
This was the way that I felt. This is how I self-destructed. And then this is how I turned things around. And this is where I am now.
Yeah. Wow. I can hardly wait to read it. Yeah. So yeah, I'll be like lined up for that one. And let me know too, because I'll help you launch it too. Like if you need some shares or yeah, because that's going to be really exciting, I think. And I just love the piece where you said that, you know, I'm reliving. I'm actually going back and I'm reliving all of these events, you know, and I think that the average person may think that that's not such a good idea, is to go back into the past and relive the events. Like I've had lots of clients say to me, you know, like, well, what is the purpose of that? Why do we have to go back? You know, and maybe that's not for everybody, you know, obviously not one shoe fits all. However, for me, and obviously for you, because you've just shared that, that piece is really important because now we actually get to process it.
Well, and I guess I should clarify, because I'm not reliving, because we can't relive it. It's already happened.
Of
Right? It's in
course.
the
Yeah.
past. I can't relive it. But to be able to go back through and
Mm-hmm.
actually like be with it,
Yeah.
and process it and acknowledge
Yeah.
it for what it really was.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there was so much purpose in it now that I
Yeah.
can see. There were so many
Yeah.
lessons
Mm-hmm.
that I learned along the way
Yeah.
that have propelled me to where I am now. And if I didn't have the opportunity to go back
Mm-hmm.
and process it and acknowledge certain pieces for what they really were,
Yeah.
I wouldn't be where I am.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, that's excellent. So where can our viewers find you?
Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
Fire Within Crisis Services.
Yeah.
My website, firewithincrisisservices.com.
Okay.
I'm also on Facebook, personal page and
Mm-hmm.
business page. I'm very active on my Instagram. That's probably the best place to find me.
Yeah.
I'm very active in my stories there. I
Mm-hmm.
am a one-man show, so I respond to any messages personally. I don't have people that work for me.
Yes.
Everything that I do for workshops is all on my website. You can contact me through
Mm.
there as well. If you wanted to book one-on-one trauma coaching sessions, they are available in person and virtually if you don't live in the same town.
Mm-hmm.
If you do live in the same town, I prefer them to be in person, because we are dealing with trauma, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes that's unavoidable and virtual is an option.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where they can find me.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Lynnette, for coming on today to share your story. I can hardly wait to get this recording out. Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute honor to have this discussion with you.
Yeah.
I am so thankful for our reconnection. We went so many
Yes.
years being disconnected.
Yes.
And, you know, when I said earlier that it takes a village, you are one of my people that was brought
Ah,
back into my life for a very, very obvious reason. So I'm
yes.
so
Thank
thankful
you.
for you.
Yeah. Thank you, Lynnette. I really appreciate that. And definitely the feeling is mutual. And you're absolutely right. Like this is a community. It's such, and and it's amazing too, because like you and I have known each other. However, some of my other guests and people that I've reached out to, I've never met. And it's
Mhm.
interesting because people say, where do you find all of these individuals? And I'm like, online, build a community. Like, never
Yeah.
underestimate the power of an online community, right?
Community is everything. I tried so hard because I had isolated myself and I was
Mm-hmm.
always like, I could do it by myself. I can do it on my own.
Yeah.
And I struggled and suffered for so long trying to heal on my own.
Yes.
And as soon as I started surrounding myself with people that were on similar paths and doing the work for themselves,
Mm-hmm.
like each in our own lane,
Yeah.
man, the empowerment through support is
Yeah.
undescribable. Like you can't even, yeah. So connection is everything. Connection,
It's everything.
community.
Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, Lynnette. Well, thank you. Thank you once again.